Hello students, research scholars and dear colleagues. Good morning. Today we are going to talk about medical pluralism and as the name of the term is reflecting, medical pluralism is actually reflecting coming together of the social sciences and medical sciences. Basically, the term medical is coming from medical sciences and pluralism is coming from the social sciences. So medical pluralism, very interesting topic, very important topic. And within this, today we'll take up the biomedicine and the germ theory. Biomedicine is something, a very new term, you can say something which came into existence in the last 100 years and became very popular and which is at the core of the medical sciences. But let me make you understand that this biomedicine and then medicine and then medical science and medical care and healthcare, these are all different terms and basically they represent different things. Maybe some sort of proximity could be there or some kind of overlapping may also be there, but not necessarily they are representing the same thing. So as a student of social sciences and as a student of as a student who are interested in understanding the larger health environment and the system of the medicines, etc., we need to understand each of them. And let me share with you that here basically the work of sociologists and historians is very important. Several medical historians have made a great contribution in understanding these things and actually giving us advanced kind of uh, conceptualization. So uh, today we are going to talk about medical pluralism in the context of biomedicine and germ theory. So let me share my screen and reach to the PPT. Medical pluralism is a very extensive topic, very comprehensive topic, and we have divided this topic into two parts. The first part, we will deal with biomedicine and germ theory of disease, and the second part will take off Ayush and the medical system or system of medicine in India. So here we are primarily dealing with the first part, that is medical pluralism, biomedicine and germ theory of disease. Here we will discuss the diversities within biomedicine and also try to understand what is this biomedicine and germ theory. And well, let me share with you here that it's like a research paper because we have to connect several scattered dots because we are not having very coherent kind of understanding or literature available. Most of the books which have been written from either medical science perspective or social science perspective have failed to present a very coherent kind of knowledge about these topics. And this lack of coherence is not because of lack of efforts by historians or medical scientists, but because of the existence of multiple narratives. So multiple narratives have been existing and this will be a contribution of the sociologist or the historian to make some kind of continuity in those multiple interpretations kind of thing. So well, this lecture is divided in 4 sections. What do we understand by medical pluralism? Then what are the different systems of medicine? Then what do we understand by biomedicine and germ theory of disease? And last, how can we examine pluralism prevailing within biomedicine? So with these kind of things, we are moving further. Let us understand medical pluralism and the word pluralism. According to Jonathan Gaber, Mike Bury, and Marian Elson, medical anthropologists were the first to use the concept of medical pluralism. Medical pluralism refers to the coexistence of different or differing medical traditions grounded in different principles or based on different worldviews. So, as we know, anthropologists were interested in understanding the culture of people who are scattered in different parts of the world, because they consider every community as socially relevant and important, and they are much interested in understanding their culture. So with the expansion of anthropological understanding, actually in the 18th and 19th century, the understanding related to their medical knowledge also expanded. And when they identified different systems of medicine prevailing in different contexts, or different systems of medicine, different systems of medicine prevailing in different contexts at cultural level or community level, then that work actually led to this conceptualization of medical pluralism. Now, Veena Bhasin is also saying similar things. According to Bhasin, medical pluralism may be defined as the synchronic existence of more than one medicine system grounded in different principles or based on different worldviews. So, this argument is actually can be seen from two, there are two important things in this argument. First is this, that it talks about diversity. Medical pluralism may be defined as synchronic existence of more than one medicine system. So when more than one system of medicine, two or more, are existing simultaneously, and then it also says that these systems of medicine are actually grounded in different principles. Now, what is important here, that every system of medicine is based on certain principles, as we'll see later on. So when these are based on different principles or different worldviews, and still they are existing together, then this is known as medical pluralism. The allopathic or modern Western medicine is widespread and more widely accepted than other forms of medicine. As of today, which one is the most popular system of medicine world over? So we know the answer, and this is actually the modern system of medicine, or which is also known as the Western system of medicine. However, there are other systems of medicine also which are prevailing or existing, and these are often known as a traditional or indigenous forms of medicine. So let me talk about this traditional system of medicine also in one small para. Traditional medicine may include different systems of medicine developed in different geographical and historical contexts, right? So historically, we know that different systems of medicine have been existing, because it's not, one should not think, or one should not say that medicine is something which emerged or developed only in contemporary context. Now, since the beginning of human civilization, there has been some kind of effort to protect man from some kind of pain or some kind of uh, uh, injury, or to minimize the pain or ailment kind of thing. There has always been some sort of effort, and when some kind of organized or systematic effort is made to uh, relieve people from those pains, this is known as some kind of medicine sort of thing, right? So the word medicine is quite old, very popular, existing historically, but the principles on which this medicine is based, we're talking about that, right? So it becomes science when it is based on certain principles, and the science is a new concept, as we know. So traditional medicine may include different systems of medicine developed in different geographical and historical contexts, like Unani medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Siddha, yoga, homeopathy. These most of these are popular in India. We also identify the terms like folk medicine, home medicine, ethnic medicine. As we talked about, the anthropologist, basically medicines which are existing at the level of the communities, or say tribal community, or different other primitive communities, ethnic medicine, then folk medicine, then prevailing at the household level, so home medicine. Beyond the world of medicines, there are multiple therapies and healing practices. Now, not everything which is used to minimize the pain or ailment is a system of medicine. Sometimes these are therapies, and sometimes these are the healing practices also. So sociologically, we are taking into consideration all these things, but yes, we do make different differentiation between the the medicines and the therapies and the healing practices. So we will talk about all these indigenous systems or the traditional systems of medicine in a later part or in the next lecture. Today, we are focusing ourselves to understand the biomedical system and germ theory, because that is a very important part. And this is considered as a mainstream or even the conventional system of medicine in contemporary context. So medical pluralism offers a variety of treatment options that health seekers may choose or utilize exclusively, successively, or simultaneously. Yes, medical pluralism is not focusing on only one concept. So as we are saying, the biomedicine, basically the dominance of one system of medicine is focusing on that particular medicine, those principles only. But medical pluralism actually reflects that it recognizes that there are different systems of medicine. The first thing is this, that it recognizes that there are different systems of medicine, and the second thing is this, that a synchronic existence of different systems of medicine, coexistence of different systems of medicine. Now, we also need to understand the term pluralism as a student of social science, and we know that pluralism is a concept that has been used in different ways, most notably in relation to social and cultural phenomenon. In contrast to monoism or unity, the term acknowledges multiplicity and differences that are different ways of knowing and being. That means simple, when we are talking about monoism, we are talking about one particular thing, the dominance of one particular phenomenon. But when you are talking about pluralism, you're talking about the existence of multiple phenomenon and the coexistence of multiple phenomenon. So this meaning of pluralism is taken in the medical context, and that is why the term medical pluralism is coming into existence, and we are talking about. So we have understood medical pluralism. Now we move to the next important part, understanding biomedicine and germ theory. As I stated earlier, basically these are the recent terms, and I must say that even among the medical scientists, there is no comprehensive integrated view about the origin of these systems, because there are multiple narratives. Maybe in next few decades, we will develop some kind of nuanced understanding of these things more categorically, more specifically. With great urbanization and industrialization caused by industrial revolution came widespread disease, which led to the public health movement by the mid of 19th century in England and Europe. I have started with this sentence because I want to keep this discussion focused on last 200 years, right? The 19th and the 20th century, because we don't find elements of this scientific medicine before that as per available literature, right? Although we have the traditional systems of medicine, but as of now, I'm not talking about the traditional systems of medicine. We are focusing on this biomedicine. That is why we are focusing on 19th and 20th century. The most important statement here is this, that the 19th century was dominated by some kind of processes of urbanization and industrialization in Europe, and these processes have created widespread disease. And to combat that prevalence of disease, the practices which came into existence were identified as public health movement. Now, we need to understand what is this public health movement also. The key tenet of public health theories, or whatever type was and is that health and disease arise from the relationship of individual and population with their natural or manufactured environment. Now, the core argument, when we are talking about public health movement, the core argument is this, that health and disease arise from a relationship of individuals and populations with their natural or manufactured environment. So we're talking about the natural or the manufactured environment, the environment in which people are living. And this environment is actually considered largely responsible for the health and disease condition prevailing among individual and population, and that the promotion of health and well-being requires intervention to modify or transform that environment. So once the causes of disease is explained in terms of the prevailing environment, then the pathways to recover from those disease is also sought in terms of the interventions made to modify or transform the environment. So we can understand this public health movement which prevailed in mid of 19th century in Europe in terms of two simple things. First thing is this, that the causation of disease is actually a result of the immediate environment. The environment can be the natural environment as well as the manufactured or the created environment. That is one thing. And second thing is this, that if you want to make an improvement over the prevailing disease conditions, then we need to make change or improvement in the immediate environment kind of thing. So this is the core argument of public health movement. So what we are saying here is this, that the mid of 19th century in Europe, there was emergence of public health movement, and that showed one kind of trajectory to make recovery from the kind of disease which were prevailing at that point of time. Now comes the second important argument. In the late 19th century, however, the significance of public health theory was challenged by the germ theory of disease. Now, the late 19th century, that is 1880s, 1870s, 80s, and 90s, right? 1850s and 60s were dominated by the public health movement. Now, later on, 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, there is emergence of another theory that is known as the germ theory. And it suggests that disease was caused by bacteria and that a specific microorganism would be present in every case of a particular disease. So now this germ theory, germ, something that we know, some kind of pathogen, it says that disease is caused by bacteria or some external pathogen, which are a specific microorganism. Organism, we know, microorganism, very small, very small organism. And because disease is caused because of this microorganism in some or the other form. Most medical research was by now being done within a dominant scientific paradigm. The germ theory of disease provides basic ground for the growth of biomedicine. So as we will see in the next paragraph, several developments took place at the end of towards the end of this 19th century, and because of those scientific researches, it was established that microorganism, pathogens, bacteria, etc., are responsible for causation of the disease. Biomedicine, also referred to as Western medicine or mainstream medicine or conventional medicine, is a branch of medical science that applies biological and physiological principles to clinical practices. So when we are talking about the microorganism, now these are the biological pathogens, right? So our understanding related to that biological pathogen are actually combined with the physiological understanding and the pharmacology kind of understanding, and the end result is the emergence of biomedicine. We'll see these things in the later arguments, but I had to introduce these concepts, so I've introduced. Biomedicine stresses standardized evidence-based treatment. Now, I've highlighted these words. Biomedicine stresses standardized evidence-based treatment validated through biological research with treatment administered via formally trained doctors, nurses, and other such licensed practitioners. Now, we have highlighted the things and we can focus on each of them. Biomedicine, which emerged as a result of the research related to germ theory, and then other comprehensive developments in the field of medicine. So now they are saying that biomedicine stresses a standardized evidence-based treatment. So the treatment is not on the basis of some kind of imagination or hunch. Rather, it is based on evidence. Now, where from the evidences are coming? The evidences are coming from those scientific tools which are being used to identify those microorganisms, right? So a standardized evidence-based treatment validated through biological research, as we just talked about the existence of biological organisms. So biological research with treatment administered via formally trained doctor, nurses, and others. And so the treatment will be done by those people who have that scientific knowledge and who have a specific training for them. And one more thing is there, that they are the licensed practitioners. So it's not only they are that socially recognized, but they are also formally recognized through some kind of licensing system. So they are the licensed practitioner. With the rise of biomedicine came greater knowledge about the causes of infectious disease. And we know that the late 19th century, the world was witnessing infectious disease. So this biomedicine was actually some kind of specific mechanism to combat the spread of infectious disease. Although we can see the coming back of infectious disease in this time span, the contemporary time span, because of the COVID-19, but literally we understand that emergence of biomedicine has helped in controlling the spread of infectious disease by the end of the 19th century in at least the Western world. The term biomedicine first surfaced in the 12th edition of Doland's Medical Dictionary, which got published in 1923. But its career took off in 1950. So what we are saying here, that the term came into existence in 1923, but it didn't become a popular term, and became a popular term in 1950s. 1950s mean after Second World War. We will find many references related to biomedicine in history, in literature available, and most of the time they are talking about the post Second World War era. But yes, the term came into existence in 1920s. Now we are saying that this biomedicine is actually interconnected, related with the outcome of germ theory. So let us try to understand this germ theory also. Germ theory was derived from the 19th century microscopic research by Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, among others. So actually by the end of 19th century, Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch talked about the existence of microorganism, and microscopic research was conducted. Pasteur demonstrated the existence of microorganisms which could be killed by sterilization or made to multiply rapidly in suitable media. Now, this is very important. Basically, when Louis Pasteur identified these microorganisms, state two things. First thing is this, that when these microorganisms are existing, then these could be killed by some external application of forces. Sterilization is one such thing which was realized at that point of time, and later on other forces are also identified. But the point here is that microorganism is identified, it could be killed in one context and made to multiply rapidly in suitable media. And these microorganisms can multiply themselves in a suitable environment. So if we provide a suitable environment, they will multiply. If they happen to find their own suitable environment, they will multiply. And if we make some kind of intervention, a specific intervention, then it can be killed also. So this is very important finding. Koch succeeded in isolating the anthrax bacillus, growing it in culture and proving by experiment that its spores could reproduce rapidly. The same thing is applicable in context of Koch also, because Koch also identified the anthrax bacillus and said that it can grow in if cultured. This provided the other principles that the microorganism should be able to be grown outside its host and should still be capable of producing the disease again in the host body. Now, this is an important intervention, that if the microorganism is developing in a specific context, then it can come into existence in a new context also, and it can be developed also. Now, this application that it can be developed also has proved very important in invention of vaccines and several other things. The biological weapons are also some kind of result of this kind of thing. So both the things could happen, that they can be used for treatment in terms of vaccines, or they can be used as some kind of weapons also, as we have been hearing about the biological weapons. Right, but these are the scientific discoveries which took place by the end of 19th century. Here, I have mentioned some of the years also. The more formal experiments on the relationship between germ and disease were conducted by Louis Pasteur between the years 1860 and 1864. And similarly, Robert Koch also made those inventions by the end of the 19th century, that is 1880 to 90. I mean, it was spread over a larger period, but I wanted to focus on a time period, and that's why I have mentioned these time periods. The point is this, that the 1870s, 80s, and 90s played very important role. Now, 1850s, we had this public health kind of thing, public health movement. 1880s, 90s, we are witnessing this germ theory and biomedicine. So what is the relationship between biomedicine and public health? Now, this is an important question. This was an important question for me also. I've tried to answer, trying to reach to some kind of conclusion. The germ theory resulted in an enhanced status for laboratory sciences and for hospital medicine and surgery, right? Germ theory, because it talked about the causation of the infectious disease, so it earned enhanced prestige within a short period of time. And because it is based on evidences or the presence of the microorganism, so actually it is based on laboratory work, or it is identified as a laboratory science. Germ theory focused attention on the specific etiology and the immediate cause of disease. Yes, it also focused attention on the individual and on interpersonal contact rather than on the significance of the wider social environment in promoting health. Right, now the important point is here that this departure is here rather than the wider social environment. As we stated, 1850s, 60s, the public health movement, they talked about the causation of disease because of the forces prevailing in the larger environment. And 1880s and 90s, now the causation of the disease is seen in terms of the presence of the microorganisms which are existing at the level of the individual, or which spread from one individual to another individual through interpersonal contacts, right? So one departure we can see categorically, biomedicine is looking at the things in a specific context at the level of the individuals, and public health was looking at the things at a larger environmental level. Now in 1928, right? See, after First World War and before Second World War, in 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. This discovery led to the introduction of antibiotics that greatly reduced the number of deaths from infection. So antibiotics is something that we are very familiar with. Most of us are aware of the term antibiotics. As of today, this is the most important intervention in medical sciences. This antibiotics, the first antibiotics, penicillin, that came into existence, that was actually invented in 1928. Now, what happened before that? When we are saying that this germ theory came into existence in 1880s and 90s, and before that in 1850s, actually some kind of environment was considered responsible for causation of this kind of thing. Then what kind of explanation we were having available for causation of disease? This is an important question. And although we find that although we find literature related to several conventional non-conventional, which are identified as traditional sciences, literature related to those traditional sciences available from 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, and even before that, because there were ancient medicines, Greek medicine, Roman medicine kind of thing. But one popular theory which we find mentioned in relevant literature even today is the miasma theory. This miasma theory is actually looking at the external environment as cause of a disease, but not the way public health is looking at it, but in a different way. The miasma theory was the predominant theory of disease transmission before the germ theory took hold toward the end of the 19th century. And it is no longer accepted as a scientific theory of disease. It held that disease such as cholera or some other infections were caused by a miasma, the ancient Greek pollution, a noxious form of bad air emanating from rotting organic matter. So rotting organic matter which are existing in the environment, they create some kind of a kind of a bad air, toxic air, and that toxic air is responsible for us for the causes of disease. That kind of understanding was there. This is known as the miasma theory, and somehow this theory is rejected because of the coming into existence of the germ theory by the end of the 19th century. So this is an important development situated in that specific context. But what is the relationship between this miasma theory and the public health movement? Are we saying that the miasma theory or the public health movement are the same? No, they are not same. Actually, public health movement is different from this miasma theory, and that's why we have highlighted this point. Within the public health field, greater attention was given to personal hygiene and to educating working class women in mothering skills. Germ theory reinforced the official attack on personal filth, spitting, less scabies, dirty bodies, but provided no commentary on the social conditions which made such problems widespread in poor districts. So we are actually talking about three things here. One is the biomedicine or the germ theory, which has focused on the specific pathogens. Then second thing is the miasma theory, which talks about some kind of bad air, but here some kind of guess or a hunch is involved because they are not in a position to directly relate the environment with the causes of the disease. So the argument is weak. And the third thing is this, we are talking about the public health, which is talking about specific things existing in the environment. So for example, the specific hygiene. And as later on, we know that the public health movement talked about waterborne disease, tried to improve water facility or the living facility. So it primarily talks about the kind of facilities and amenities that we have in the environment, which are directly influencing our physical and social living conditions. So we have tried to situate the emergence of biomedicine in the specific environment which was prevailing at the end of the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century, basically with the invention of antibiotics. Science has made, medical science has made a special uh, achievements, and the Western world, actually the infectious disease or the communicable disease were controlled. We talked about these things when we addressed the issue related to disease also in our second or third lecture. Now we come to this, after understanding the larger environment of biomedicine, and I have spent plenty of time also, let us talk about the kind of pluralism which is prevailing within biomedicine. Modern biomedicine is notably secular, indifferent to ideas of the supernatural or the spirit, and concentrates on the body and society to determine causes and cures. So why do we say this is secular? Because again, we need to situate ourselves in the historic time period. Late 19th century, actually departure from supernatural forces, right? Supernatural forces, because before that, yes, this was also a kind of established thing that disease is caused because of the ill will or some kind of god's curse sort of thing, right? The supernatural causes were playing important role in the time period before this invention of all these scientific interventions. So this is considered some kind of secular departure from supernatural forces, focusing on the scientific things. In difference to ideas of supernatural or the spirit, and concentrates on the body and society to determine causes and cures. Modern medicine approaches. Modern medicine approaches healthcare from two angles. Now, there are different approaches you will get to know or talk about, but we are trying to simplify the things. So please follow us here. Modern medicine approaches healthcare from two angles. The first, the medical model, focuses on the eradication of illness through diagnosis and effective treatment. The second, the social model, focuses on change in society and in people's own lifestyle to make the population healthier. So we can talk about that there are two models available in biomedicine at initial level. One model is focusing on the medical dimensions, and the second one is focusing on the population related dimensions that we can also identify as the social dimensions. Right. Now, this modern allopathic medicine consists of two main branches. These two dimensions are actually leading to the development of or growth of two specific branches, or one is this curative medicine and the second one is this preventive medicine. Curative medicine is following the medical principles for making some kind of a correction or cure, and the preventive medicine is talking about some kind of prevention from occurrence of the disease. Then there are several other branches also that people have been talking about. Very often, some other departments are also talked about, or branches are also talked about. Now, these branches are promotive medicine, rehabilitative medicine, social medicine, community medicine. Now, I'm not saying that these are not separate branches or these are not separate approaches. They may be, but primarily we can understand these by making use of the first two, the curative medicine and the preventive medicine, because somehow they share some kind of common principles. And as we stated earlier, if a system of medicine is based on similar principles, then we will consider that as part of one system of medicine, right? So that is why the approach is differing here. One is focusing on the biomedical practices, largely basically the medical practices largely. So this is the curative medicine, and the second one is focusing on the larger environment, the external environment, the characteristics of the population. So that is known as the preventive medicine. And rest of like the promotive medicine, which talks about promotion of health condition, that is in making improvement in the physiological and other conditions, the internal structure, internal functioning of the body. So those are the promotive medicine. Then the rehabilitative, that is if somebody has suffered from some kind of a specific disease, and if the immunity system or the physiology has become very weak, then some kind of rehabilitative medicine is required. And then we also talk about the social medicine and the community medicine, but primarily we'll focus these two, curative and preventive, because these will help us to understand the rest of the things automatically. Now we come to this curative medicine. Curative medicine aims at removing disease from patients. Removing, if the body has become sick, then the body should be freed from those ailments. That is removing the disease from the patients. Curative medicine involves treatment by administering antibacterial and antibiotic drugs which produce a reaction that neutralizes the disease, and few other interventions depending upon the specialization and the problems and symptoms identified. So fine, some person is suffering from some problem, let the problem get identified, and once the problem is getting identified, then some kind of specific treatment is actually suggested. It may be antibacterial or antibiotic or some other related depending upon the specific symptoms or diagnosis. But this diagnosis is taking place on the basis of the symptoms reported by the patients, as well as the evidences collected through tests conducted in laboratories. Now that is very important, that the tests are conducted in laboratory. These are not based on the hunch or the guesswork. Curative medicine is as old as medicine itself, but in the 20th century, it acquired unprecedented scientific knowledge about disease, medicine, and ways of administering the medicine. Because the growth of the laboratories took place in late 19th and 20th century, as we stated earlier. The identification of the microorganism took place in the late 19th century. So this has actually strengthened the curative medicine because it became convenient to identify the causation of the disease as such. As a result of this specialization, surgery, radiology, and anesthesia are developed, which are based on skills. And then several interrelated things kept on developing within this curative science, curative medicine, and then some kind of surgery, that is operating the body. and other radiations and anesthesia related things also took place. Now, the larger confusion is coming from the major specializations. We know that within medical science, there are a huge number of specializations and super specializations, general medicine, general surgery, pediatrics, obstetrics, gynecology, dermatology, etc., etc. There's so many neurosurgery, then psychiatry, etc. But these are actually part of medical education. These are specializations and super specializations related to medical specialization and medical education. But primarily, they are all part of this curative medicine, and the basic principles are actually shared, right? And as we all know, because of our general understanding, that all those students who are learning medical sciences, they generally follow the common curriculum for the first 4 years, and a degree which is popularly known as MBBS in Indian context, right? Then there are, when we are looking at it from the perspective of pluralism or medical pluralism, then we happen to find that there are different formats under which this medical or this curative medicine is operating. The formats are actually differing from one place to another place, one country to another country, one context to another context. There are different structures and formats in which the curative medicine is provided to the needful in different parts of the world. Some of these structures and formats are government, private, philanthropic, collective, cooperative, primary, secondary. So there are different formats and structures. We will talk about these things at a later stage when we will talk about the health structures. But some people often talk about these structures, the private medicine, public medicine, then the primary medicine, secondary healthcare, etc. when we talk about medical pluralism. But actually medical pluralism is more related with the principles on which medical sciences or the systems of medicine are based upon, and not the formats in which these are actually functioning. Now comes the second important thing, that is the preventive medicine. By definition, preventive medicine is applied to health of persons in group, that is, it focuses on population rather than individual. Now this is important. When we talk about preventive medicine, then we are actually talking about population. And what is happening here? Then here we are talking about the population or not the individuals. So preventive medicine is also something which identifies the features of the characteristics or the features of the people at a larger level, at the level of the group or the community, or at the level of the population. And then interventions are suggested on the basis of the observations made at that level. By definition, preventive medicine is applied to health of persons in groups, that is, it focuses on population rather than individual. Primary objective of preventive medicine is the prevention of disease and promotion of health. Preventive medicines have helped us in decreasing the rate of morbidity and mortality caused from diphtheria, tetanus, typhoid, fever, and other diseases, several infectious diseases, etc., which prevailed in the late 19th and early 20th century, different parts of the world. Then it helps us to understand the nutrition-related things, the problems related to vitamins, minerals, proteins, and all other things. Modern preventive medicine has been defined as the art and science of health promotion, disease prevention, disability limitation, and rehabilitation. So here we are talking about the rehabilitation and promotion related things are also mentioned when we talk about this preventive medicine. So then we come to the last part, that is social medicine. Although social medicine is considered as a different branch, but yes, very often it is coming closer to preventive medicine. However, there is some kind of difference between preventive medicine and social medicine depending upon the institutional characteristics and or the educational institution. These differences are actually part of the systems of an education, or you can say medical education. In the 19th century, social medicine emerged as a movement to investigate medical problems in the light of social science. So basically, if we look at the origin of this, then again we see that in the 19th century the interventions were coming from social sciences, because the larger environment was considered important for understanding the causation of disease, because at that point of time the specific understanding related to microorganism or the germ theory was not available up to that level. The idea of social medicine is spread throughout Europe and England after First World War. Social medicine is the epidemiological study of people and community rather than individual. So again, it is epidemiology, that is, I mean, prevailing at a larger population, epidemic, something which is related to epidemic kind of thing. So we can see that social medicine is sharing the arguments of the preventive medicine. And according to Path, social medicine is not a new branch of medicine, but somewhat an extension of the public health kind of thing. So ultimately, we can conclude this session by saying that biomedicine has played very important role. It is one of the important invention or set of inventions in the 20th century, and at a very primary level, it examines the problems related to disease and health at two levels. One is the curative level, and second is the preventive level. The curative level, there are several specializations. The preventive level, there are several specializations or diversities, but primarily these two are getting guided by the same set of principles, and those principles are actually somehow concentrated or located within the system of biomedicine, and which are closer to the germ theory of disease. So in this lecture, we have tried to understand the diversities within biomedical system, and especially we have tried to understand biomedicine system as such. So thank you very much for watching this lecture. And if there are a few points which remain undefined or unexplained, then do ask in your questions, and subscribe my channel for getting information related to further uploads, and share this so that it can reach to the other concerned people. I have used some of the references. Here you can see the list of references. Here again, my book on sociology of health. I've taken most of the content from here, but yes, there are so many other things, new things I have added here. So you cannot find all this content in that particular book. So thank you very much. And I'm going to stop share and then close this lecture also. So have a great day.